Thank you all for waiting. I really wanted this track to be on time to show all the other technical people that the marketing team has our timing down, the events team has it down, but alas, we were sabotaged. But I'm really, really excited for everyone we have lined up today. The purpose of this track is, we have so many technical conversations going on at FDS this week about finding product market fit for Filecoin and all of the other teams nucleating in the ecosystem. But no one's really talking about how marketing can get you to product market fit. And we really want to show all the founders and builders in the ecosystem and elsewhere that this is an underutilized tool in your toolkit to getting to where you need to be for sales success. So we have some amazing people today. I'm really excited to moderate this opening conversation between, everyone knows Rachel. Rachel is our head of marketing and comms at the Filecoin Foundation, and Titus is the VP of go-to-market at Civic, which is a decentralized identity solution. And I said in all the descriptions of everything that there are no playbooks and no experts in Web3 marketing, but if we had to categorize people as experts, these are definitely the two. So very excited to have them open up the track. So would love to give you both just an opportunity to introduce yourself. Rachel, why don't we start with, you started at PL and now you're here.
Sure. Hi. It's good to see you all. Thanks for coming and joining us today. It's good to see so many marketers with us today. We were talking before we started about how we wish there were more like founders and project builders in this room, but I think the goal is to get them to watch this recording because so many times builders are heads down and they are not thinking about marketing until it's like a little later in the game. And I think that every project would benefit from having these marketing discussions earlier. So I started at PL. I was their first comms hire in 2019. I came from a traditional tech background, and it was a very, like in Web 2 tech, big tech, like working on like Amazon, Google, those kinds of technology companies doing comms around those products. And it was a steep learning curve, but I do think that one thing that I learned that I brought over that's been really helpful is the idea of community building and having as many different people around you tell your story with the same message and amplify it from as many subject matter experts as you can. So like building that deep bench.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Titus. I run go-to-market for Civic. My journey started in social media, back when social media wasn't even an industry, like 2009. So it was fun times. Facebook had like 100,000 users back in Romania where I'm from. They went through like a little bit of a fintech journey, and then AI, when AI wasn't a thing. It's like deep learning before kind of the spooky language models we see nowadays. So it was like early days back then. And then I found my way into crypto through Civic, 2019. I was their first marketing and comms hire. And then ventured my way into AI and data again, and then back into crypto. I think the main thing that I'm pretty good at this point is starting from scratch, like the whole like marketing comms go-to-market function. First hire, build up a team, kind of create that flywheel, get things going, get the revenue going, become self-sustainable as a business unit, stuff like that. So yeah, excited to share some kind of nuggets from my journey here.
Awesome. Super excited to have you both. So I want to spend a few minutes addressing the question posed by the session, which is what does marketing have to do with PMF? So Rachel, I know you have some thoughts about what do you think most Web3 teams get wrong when they're searching for PMF?
So I think so often in Web3, the builders are really building for that early adopter community and not really thinking about like, is this tech like easy to use for anybody beyond that early adopter group? And so it's a different kind of marketing. Marketing to your early adopters is like one set of messaging, but then marketing to everybody else, figuring out what the right messages are and like tailoring it to those audiences. And mostly helping those folks who are not those early adopters understand why they want to make this switch. Like, why do I need to think about storage? Why should I care about decentralized storage? Like what I have works fine just now. So trying to like the mind shift that you're trying to work with people.
Yeah, cannot agree more with that. I think the flywheel of like usage is super important. It's like don't just get the initial gambling users coming in and like farming your token, farming your rewards, and then have them leave afterwards. Like make sure you're sticky, make sure that go-to-market machine is going well from that perspective. And that's something that doesn't like is not marketing or comms. It's just I think that spans beyond. It has to be a partnership with product. I think I cannot stress how important it is for marketing and comms people to be in direct contact with the product team, with the engineering team, with the people building. Otherwise, it creates that disconnect between like what are we building and what the market wants or what the market is expecting.
So I think to what you're alluding to, which most of us know, is that marketing is more than just hitting send on tweets. It's a way to measure the impact of how we're connecting with our audiences, a way to get data-driven decisions and convert our listeners into users and clients. So Titus, I'd love for you to give your spiel on what's the foundation for creating a go-to-market strategy and where does marketing and comms fit in?
So I think first and foremost, you need to define who you're building for. And that happens even before you're starting to actually build the product. And then essentially go out there and close your first customer and be like sign up your first 1,000 users if you're a consumer app. Sign your first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paying customers, not just free customers, paying customers. And then I think that's where marketing and comms comes into play. It can't be early enough, right? Define those messages with product, define those messages with sales, and get in there so you're ready to amplify once stuff starts working. Because once stuff starts working, you need to be there and start amplifying and expanding the reach of that particular message that worked. So what's bringing in new users? Can we 10x that? Can we 100x that? Can we 1000x that? And just like incrementally grow from there. That's, I think, the way I've seen stuff work. In the real world, both in Web 2 and Web 3 companies, it's not like a Web 3 problem. It's like a problem for any kind of startup, any kind of startup pre-product market fit. So, I mean, all projects that are building in Web 3 right now are, for all intents and purposes, startups. Like, we don't have to kind of invent a new word for it. So that's kind of my take on GTM.
And I mean, this is so obvious, but I don't like, because Web3 companies, they are startups, they're moving so quickly. Sometimes comms and marketing is a little bit of an afterthought. The exercise of talking to as many different stakeholders as you can and talking about their user journey and their experience and the pain points that they hit. And somebody told me this like wonderful strategy of like figuring out your messaging is to talk to different users. And when you say, you keep asking, why is that a problem? Why is that a problem? So what are you doing? Like, oh, I'm the New York Times and we have all these stories. We don't have any, like, we're paying so much for these archives for people. And why is that a problem? Well, it's because that money could be going to something else. And why is that a problem? You just keep like sort of narrowing down with folks on, and that's a storage client. And then you go to like the storage provider and you sort of narrow it down. Why is that a problem? To try to get to the core of what an issue is and then start building your messaging from there. I think that's, versus like we built the product and now here it is. And now we're going to start thinking about our message. So tailoring the product to your client first and then building around that.
One more quick thing to add there. I think not just understanding the problem well, but understanding where the problem sits on the priority list. Because if you're building something that's a nice to have on a list of 10 things, that's going to be way harder and more expensive to market to that particular audience versus if this is a burning problem. So you're better off finding a burning need in a smaller audience than having a lukewarm need in a large audience.
Yeah, I think a lot of what, Rachel, you just touched on was this qualitative work to figure out where you're driving your product strategy. But can you talk a little bit about the metrics that you can glean from marketing in Web3 and how it differs from the Web2 traditional space?
Yeah. So we were talking about this right before the session started. There are so many communications channels. It's like an overwhelming glut of communications channels. I told somebody, don't ever send me a message on Telegram because I will not even open it, which is a really embarrassing and terrible thing to say in this world where so many people are talking on Telegram. But, there's now a Filecoin Discord channel. We have the Slack channel. We have Telegram. We have newsletters. We have multiple newsletters. Sort of but you also want to, like, those are things, those are certainly things to track. There's all the social media metrics to track, but you also want to track builders. You want to track, and then the thing that's most interesting to me is like the social chatter beyond what you're putting out there. So how many people outside of your world are talking about this content that you're putting out, or retweeting your stuff, or having conversations that you're not starting and generating that they're having on their own about Filecoin or about projects in the ecosystem? That to me is like the nugget of success, that your message is resonating when other people start telling your story.
Yeah, 100%. I think those are great metrics to look at. Like the other thing that I like to track, and I tend to kind of rally the team around, are revenue and usage of the app, DApp, project, whatever you're building. I think it's not just product's responsibility, not just sales responsibility. Like, we're building pipeline together, comms, marketing, sales, product. We're all in this together. So kind of sharing that metrics helps build that kind of working relationship where you both work to bring in that particular type of user or that particular type of new client. And at the end of the day, we all grow as a business. Because I think, sometimes you see a lot of chatter out there. It's not converting. You're not in the right channel, maybe. But then if you see pipeline growing, if you see user base growing, then you can connect the two dots and then invest more in that channel and grow it from there.
So I think it would be great for you guys to talk about why this stuff is important to think about before a product launch. That would obviously be ideal. But also how these strategies can come into play, months, maybe a year out after launch, how you can use this to keep refining and driving towards product market fit if something's not working.
All right, I'll start. So I think ultimately when you launch a product, you want that message to stick. And if you launch with something that's not like pre-engineered or pre-worked on, it's almost like launching a feature that hasn't been tested. So you're better off going out there, testing, doing those like qualitative meetings, doing some quant research as well, if you have the budget for it, and understanding what resonates with your audience, and then building that initial test bed of alpha customers, that initial closed beta user list, making sure you have the audience prepped to receive what product you're building. Otherwise, it will be a steep uphill battle for people to jump in, or for the right audience to jump in at that point. And that essentially also can inform the product and the product roadmap as well, as you're building that message together with the product team and engineering team. It's understanding like what are people resonating with. Then one thing will be prioritized over another. The other piece, which I think is critical and relates to the previous topic that we just talked about, is make sure you have the analytics figured out with the product engineering team and you have access to them. Because marketing comms sometimes is like kind of peripheral to the org, unfortunately, and we don't have access to all the data we need. It's like somewhere in Redshift, and we're in crypto, and like getting access to some of those pieces of data is very difficult because of the lockdown features that we have built into our security measures, which I mean is great because it keeps stuff safe, but like makes our life very, very hard post factum when stuff is launched and we need those metrics. So I would say that's probably the most important piece, is getting that initial traction with product engineering as you're building and iterating on messaging together with product features, and making sure you're like launching the right things at the right time with the right message.
And I'm just going to give a shameless plug now to the work of the foundation and the comms team. If you haven't met Danielle, if you're building in the Filecoin ecosystem and you haven't met Danielle, who leads all of our ecosystem comms, as soon as this is over, you should come up and introduce yourself, because our mission at the foundation is not to really talk about the foundation. It's to talk about all the teams building in the ecosystem, right? It's like, I think of it as like shine the light out. We shouldn't be shining a spotlight on the foundation. We should be shining a light on all the different teams who are building cool things, who are storing data on the network, who are building new features to make it more functional. And one of the things that Danielle does so well is help tell those stories. So everything from helping with press releases and pitching, getting you on podcasts, getting you in their newsletter, like it makes our job easier when we have the content and the stories to tell. And we're here for you all, especially with startups who like don't have the resources to hire a comms person at the beginning. Like, let us help you. And if you know of other teams that are building, send them our way, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I think one of the foundation's core goals right now is to uplift our ecosystem and our community, which brings me to the concept of community in Web3, which I think is seems more existential than other products that you're building. It doesn't matter if whatever some random car has a community, but if your protocol doesn't have a community, it's probably not going many places. So would love to hear from you guys the importance about community building, and how marketing and comms plays a role and how that can translate into success for your product or your business.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm coming back to one of the first points that I had earlier is make sure that the community and the conversation there is aligned with what you're building and what you're building towards. So if you're building an infrastructure product, then make sure you're helping builders build. If you're building something that's more like entertainment focused or leisure focused, then have fun with people in like the Discord channel or Telegram channel. And then make sure you're building where people hang out, because it's much harder to bring them in a new place than to go where they actually are. So if they're on X, stay there. If you're on the Discord, stay there. If they're on Telegram, stay there as well. But it's very hard to bring them from one channel to the other. And I think that's I think the bottom line when it comes to community building in mind is be helpful, support them, answer the questions. Don't make them wait too long for a response. I think that's a critical thing, and be as helpful as possible.
Yeah, and I would just add it's a symbiotic relationship between Web3 companies and their communities, right? Because like you need them and they need you, and like a perfect example is like when something goes wrong, and something always does go wrong. You want a community of people who like love your product, love what you're building, love your vision no matter what, to help combat FUD and, you know, negative sentiment online, right? And so you see all these different crypto projects building their like armies of folks who are out there who are like beating the drum and helping tell their story too. And so, you know, bringing folks into the fold, making everybody feel welcome, being mindful of that in your comms, like what is the messaging and the language is going to make that feels inclusive. And how can you like help lift up that community so they feel like special and important, so that when things do go wrong, and they always do, you have their support and not their, you know, anger.
Great. Before we go to questions, want to ask if you guys have any cautionary words for founders and builders in the room, any traps not to fall into, what to do when things go wrong. Not everything is all shiny in the comms world at times. We have fire drills all the time. So I would love you to speak a bit to that.
So, I mean, that sort of touches on crisis comms, which is like the thing that I think keeps all of us up at night in the comms and marketing world, like what's going to go wrong and how are you going to handle it? And especially in Web3, where distributed companies, we're all around the world working in every time zone. These projects are set up, so they're moving so quickly, you have to be ready to respond, right? And so being proactive and thoughtful about your crisis comm strategy, you know, and also like, you know, having a team in place. It doesn't have to just be you, like to build that war room when something really does go wrong. To help you come up with like the right messaging, the short message that you want to put out there. Also, like, I think that in this industry, more so than others, transparency is really critical. A lot of times when things go wrong, like in big corporate companies or Web 2, it's like really tight, short, 2-sentence, and I'm not going to give you anything else. But I think that in crypto, there is a real benefit to like being a little bit more open. Hey, we screwed up. We're working on it. We're fixing it. Stay with us. Thanks for your support. I think that can go a long way.
I don't think anything that I can add to that can enrich the conversation on the what to do afterwards. I think beforehand, what I would say, be careful who you associate with, because there's a lot of people out there that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing or promising things that are not supposed to be promising. And if you associate your work and your project and your comms or your marketing with that particular person or group, it is very difficult to disassociate from that. Once the bird is out of the cage or cat's out of the box, it's very hard to put it back in. So that's my my cautionary tale is like do more investigation than necessary on that KOL. Do your due diligence on the project, on the founders of the project they're doing your partnership with, your launch with, and so on. Make sure that they're not like misusing user data, they're not trying to scam people, so on and so forth. There's so many traps out there, so we all need to be very, very careful.
Spooky words from Titus to end the conversation. Does anyone have any questions?
My question is for you to build off of that. What you mentioned a few things to look at, but what are those metrics or signs, or where should we be looking to judge those for partnerships?
Oh, in terms of the avoiding the spookies, yeah. I mean, usually kind of my gut feeling is like when something's too good to be true, especially when it comes to like their marketing messaging and their product promise, it probably is. There's like guaranteed returns is usually a red flag. Make 10x the market returns within X amount of time. That's almost always going to end up bad. Something that requires people to create pyramids, even if it's not a pyramid scheme, it still looks like a pyramid scheme. So that's always like tricky as well. Founders with uncertain or unclear online footprint. I know we all love our anonymity, but people, we're all doing business here. We need to know who each of the people involved in those projects are. And if they're very, very reluctant to do that, then that might be a red flag. The other things that I look at is whether they're spamming. That's also a good indicator. If there's a lot of spam out there, there's like ads claiming preposterous things. If people are like sharing stuff with dubious links connected to that project, look at it with a finer comb or like a more magnifying glass from that perspective. Other things, I mean, if they're spoofing their token volumes, if they have like weird erratic token behavior, that's always a sign that something may be weird there. Somebody's attacking them, or something's going on from that perspective. So you need to be careful. Even if it's not their fault, sometimes you may end up in a war that's not yours. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Other stuff, if they're buying followers, if they have fake followers, if they have bots, like botting stuff all over social media, that's always a red flag because they're trying to cut some corners there. Then you don't know what other places they're cutting corners on. Yeah, I mean, generally, these are the things that I tend to look at. I'm sure there's others, but yeah, this is like top of mind for me.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much. Very interesting points. I'm curious, like, I work with Glyph and we have such incredible support within the Filecoin community. It's so great to see our content always amplified, but sort of in the next phase, we're looking to really expand past this ecosystem. What sort of advice do you have in communicating the message of what Filecoin is to a larger audience that don't really understand the same goals and values that we all do here?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I think, again, like this is a place where we can help each other. Mm-hmm. How can we simplify the message? Like, we have this, Filecoin is a decentralized storage network powered by cryptocurrency. Okay, that means nothing to like my mother, right? Or to like the casual, like even Web 2 enterprise, like that sentence doesn't mean anything. How about just like make better storage? Like, really thinking about how can we simplify this message for different audiences. We need to get there, and like would like to work with you all to get there together. Because again, I think if we're all sort of pounding the same message, it's better.
Love it. Would love to chat with you more later. Thank you.
Rachel, you touched a little bit on like the transparency with the community and, hey, we're working on it. That message. I think that's been particularly tough for me, someone who from more of a Web 2 background in this kind of decentralized universe we're in now, especially in events and marketing, wanting to have it all buttoned up and looking great before it's like seen by anyone. And I'm curious, Titus, in your ecosystem, how do you all approach like the, hey, we're still working on it message, or keeping it transparent with the community that things aren't necessarily done, they're just in the works when it comes to your products?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's one of those things like in startups in general, not just Web2 or Web3 or WebX, whatever it is. Um, we are always tasked with selling what's going to be on the truck, not what is on the truck currently. So managing that expectation is very important. Is saying like, hey, this is what's available today, and this is what we're building towards, and being transparent about it, being honest about it. As like, hey, this doesn't work right now, but it will soon. And that soon might have a timeline on it or not, depending on like how much pressure you want to put on an engineering team as well. I think it's something to keep in mind as a comms and marketing person. When you're putting stuff out there with a deadline and that hasn't been agreed upon with the engineering team, you're going to create chaos. So that's something to be careful with when putting that out there. But yeah, it's an expectations game, and like creating a relationship with the early adopter and making sure like they understand what they're getting themselves into as well. Because like, oh no, this is not like a traditional transaction where like you're buying something that's specifically set in stone. It's more around you're co-building with us, you're on a journey with us, especially as like many features are not quite there yet. And then once they launch, you get first access to them, and then later the rest of the market gets access to those as well. But that comes back to how burning the need is, right? Because if the need is super important, people are willing to wait for that need to be solved. If it's a lukewarm, then, or if it's already solved, then that's a different problem.
All right. Thank you guys so much. So excited for you to open up.